Let's go back a long ways. Tell me about the first time you remember ever seeing or hearing about the Chili Peppers. First time you ever heard the name of the band.
The first time that I remember hearing the name of the band was that I had a guitar teacher named Mark Nine. He's the only guitar teacher who I ever was really excited about and that I feel like I really got some good things from. At the time that I started playing guitar, I was into punk, and every guitar teacher I took a lesson from would start insulting punk right away. I'd tell them that was my favorite music, and they'd tell me that it wasn't music and all this kind of stuff. Then this guy, Mark Nine, came along, and he had played with Nina Hagen. He'd been in her band for a period of time, and Pat Smear was the other guitar player. I guess Mark was the lead guitar player, and Pat was the rhythm guitar player for a period of time. And he thought Pat Smear was a great guitarist, and Pat Smear was the main reason that I started playing guitar. The first things I learned were germs, and so the fact that I'd found a guitar teacher who thought Pat Smear was a great guitar player was really exciting to me. Plus, he was into all this psychedelic music from the 60s. And so he was playing with various things. He had a band called Underworld. He played with a guy called Randall Kennedy in Reconstruction, and it was like a poetry, arty kind of thing. And he had a ska group called Ska Cha Cha. And I was really into everything he did. I had cassettes, tapes of everything. And at one point he came and said that there was a band called the Red Hot Chili Peppers that he was auditioning for and that he was hoping to get in. And he played guitar and bass, and it got stuck in my head that he was auditioning for bass for this band. And then probably about anywhere from 6 months to a year after this, I saw the video for True Men Don't Kill Coyotes on MTV. And I was like, he wouldn't have been a good replacement for this bass player. Or of course, this bass player, nobody could replace this guy. But as it turned out, it was guitar that he had been auditioning for. So yeah, there was a period of a few weeks where I remember him talking about how he hoped he would get hired to be in this band. But at the time, they were choosing between Jack Sherman and Mark Nine, and they wound up choosing Jack Sherman.
How old were you at that time? Do you remember?
Yeah, it had to be when I was 13 or 14 that he was auditioning, because Hillel and Jack were originally in the band for only 6 months, and then they quit, and that's when Anthony and Flea looked for new guys. So the band starts in 83. I'm not sure what month.
And then how old were you when you ended up joining the band?
18.
So you hear about them. You already know about the band for four or 5 years before you auditioned.
Okay, so it's not like I found out about them and then I was suddenly a fan of them.
You just were aware of them.
Yeah, I was aware of them. I think the next step was I had a friend named Jerry who worked for the Frank Zappa family, and I used to spend a lot of time at his house listening to music, listening to a lot of Frank Zappa live tapes and stuff like that. And at one point, Jerry gave me a compilation tape. It was mostly esoteric, kind of avant-garde music. There was Meredith Monk on it. I think there was even some funkadelic on it. He was the first person who mentioned funkadelic to me. And one of the things on that cassette tape was the song "Yertle the Turtle" from their second album, Freaky Styley. And I thought that was really good. Loved everything about it. The drums reminded me of a funk version of a Captain Beefheart beat, and the wah-wah pedal thing was so clever, and the way that he incorporated it into the guitar part. And that song has this great way of each element coming in one by one, and so you really fully appreciate how great the guitar part is, how great the drum beat is, because you hear each thing sort of one added to the next. But at that point, they weren't that different to me than the Residents or these other things. Their drummer had played with Captain Beefheart, and I was mainly at that time I was really intensely into Frank Zappa and Steve Vai and stuff like this. I was really trying. I'd been through many other phases, but at that period of time, I was really trying to just get to a point where nobody could tell me I wasn't a good guitar player. I was trying to really, at a certain point, I was like, I'm going to, whatever people think is the hardest stuff to play, I'm going to try to play that. But the Chili Peppers were just an interesting band and fun to watch and stuff on these videotapes that I had. And I bought their first record when I was in Florida. I have this strange memory of, I bought their record, and then I went up to my stepmom, who I would often just go to tell weird little things. Like one day I'd come to her and I'd say, like, I decided what my favorite ending to any album is. It's the ending to Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust by David Bowie. I just say things that she didn't care about at all, But I remember listening to that Chili Peppers record and saying, I could never be in a band like that. I could never be in that band because there's not enough musical variety for me. It was a strange thing to say. She was like, oh, you would never be in that band. Okay. It seemed like the most far-fetched thing in the world that some record I bought at the Big Peaches record store, I'd say, I couldn't be in that band. It still sticks in my head. But basically, I had a friend in high school who was really into the Chili Peppers, and he'd gone to see them at least a couple times. I remember he went and saw them at Fender's Ballroom. That was before I was going to see them, with Fishbone and Faith No More on that Best of the West tour and stuff. And he was also into that License to Ill album as well. Like, he got me excited about music that was sort of outside of the spectrum of what I'd been listening to lately, music that was more like about fun, because I'd gotten into such a technical frame of mind. And so he and I went to see the Chili Peppers at the Variety Arts Center downtown. And I'd been very happy at previous shows I'd been to, like Adrian Belew and Stanley Clarke and things. I'd felt the feeling of joy at concerts before, but there was nothing in comparison to seeing that band. It was when the original lineup was back together, but they hadn't come out with their third record yet. And everything I'd heard of them, everything that I'd seen on videotape did not prepare me for the intensity of that show. It was so psychedelic. They had the fluorescent paint everywhere on their bodies. You couldn't see them. And the black lights, it felt so otherworldly. It felt like me and the other, however many people it was, 1,000 people who were there. Like, it felt like we just all went into a dream together or something.
Wow.
It did not feel like reality. That I saw 2 shows where they did that, where they wore the paint, and never had experienced anything where the audience and the performers felt like we were all one thing. We were all in the same place together. The rest of the world didn't exist.
Wow.
Everybody's completely happy. Everybody's out of their minds. Everybody's jumping around. As I say, punk was the music I started with, but I was too young. I was into punk when I was 9, 10, 11, so I was too young to be going to shows. But at their show, it was like I was feeling that same energy that I remembered imagining about punk shows, where people call them mosh pit now. We called it a slam pit back then.